And this is for the students in the class of 2022, but also the alumni will absolutely affirm this, is that your Jesuit education is part of you forever. It's in your heart, it's in your mind, it's in your soul, and it will always be there, and you can call on it. And that's something I want you to remember. And I call on it all the time, you know, through hard times, through good times. And believe me, when the pandemic started, we had an unknown virus from China. We didn't know how it was transmitted. We didn't have any medications. We didn't have any vaccines. We didn't have any tests. The country was scared. We might have run out of food. We could have had millions of deaths. And it was scary for everybody. But I went back to the roots that I had, the foundation that I had. I looked back because my Jesuit education was always a part of me. And there were so many things that I reflected on that I knew I could get through it. I'll just make a couple of comments. Two are kind of obvious, and one, the third one's even obvious too. But some of the things that were so important, and I want to emphasize the self-discipline. The self-discipline you learn will be with you forever, and you can count on it. And I started with my self-discipline really understanding that when I went to college. I was the first person to go to college in my family. I had the opportunity to go to Harvard. I didn't know any better. I went there. Seemed like a good idea. But 90% of the kids had better scores than I did. They've been prepping for all those classes, more vigorously than I did. They've been to all the prep schools, but they didn't have the self-discipline. When you come from Jesuit, you've been studying your entire career. You know that hard work pays off, that it's not about taking the easy way, it's about achieving quality. And that self-discipline that you have will stay with you forever, and it allowed me to get through college, to get through medical school. And when COVID hit, and it was 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year, I knew that I could rely on all the things I learned from Jesuit to get me through. Second thing that gets you through, that's very important that I rely on, is the lessons of leadership. People don't think about leadership very much in today's society, but it's one of the most important things you'll get from Jesuit. And the first rule about being a good leader is being a good follower, right? You have to learn to be a good follower before you're a good leader. And in 8th and 9th grade and 10th grade, you learn to follow. You follow the upperclassmen. You follow your teachers. You follow the priests. You follow the example of Christ. You become a good follower before you do anything. And then you become a leader. You become a leader, whether it's in forensics or theater or ROTC or sports or student government. The leadership lessons you learn are incredibly important to you. And yeah, there are born leaders, but those born leaders study a lot and understand about what it means to set an example and to lead through those examples and not point to your stripes. And that's something you'll always keep with you. The last thing I want to say about what will be with you forever, and it's the most important, is the spiritual enlightenment embodied in service to others and humility. Service to others is really what it's about. I mean, you had 20,000 hours of projects. You're doing soup kitchens beforehand. And that's something that will always stay with you. For so many people today, it's all about them all the time. And when you come from Jesuit, it's not about you. It's certainly not about you all the time. You are really meant for others. And I'm going to quote a few things in Scripture because I do believe humility and service go together. And I'm going to bring this together and again talk about COVID. It's all over the Bible. Micah, O mortal, what is good? He has shown you. What does the Lord require? To act justly and love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Ephesians, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. In 1 Peter chapter 5, all of you clothe yourself with humility towards one another. I mean, it couldn't be clearer that we are meant to be humble servants for other people. And if you don't get that by the time you finish high school, it's very difficult to get that, thereafter. But this is part of your body. It's part of your soul. It's part of your mind. It's going to be with you. And I want to tell you that my experience in Washington, D.C., There are a lot of people there for all kinds of reasons, a lot of them self-serving. But let me tell you, the leaders of COVID, and again, every day I was in the Situation Room of the White House, you know, where it all happens. Every single day I work with the Vice President. Most days I work with President Trump. But just about everybody around that table were people of faith who believed in God and asked for God's help. The Vice President, every day, the Situation Room, when we were making decisions that affected our country, our world, we started with a prayer every single day in the Situation Room. And we all asked to be God's servants and God's instruments on this earth to help here build the planet. Bob Redfield, who's a CDC director, devout Catholic servant, deployed many times with Catholic Charities to Haiti to help people after storms. And he felt it was his mission in life to make people healthier. And he spent his entire career working on people who had HIV and AIDS and working for cure. Francis Collins, who was the director of the NIH. You've probably seen Francis Collins, who's the director of the NIH for 12 years. He was the director of the Genome Project that sequenced the human genome. Francis is a devout Christian, but he was an atheist until only a short period of time ago when he said, I'm going to see what this religion is all about. So I'm going to examine it, just like a scientist would. And he had a moment, and I'll quote him when he said, I decided to explore the rational underpinnings of belief in God. I expected to find none, and was astounded to discover that there are strong arguments from nature and philosophy that point to God's existence, but those do not constitute proof. Apparently, God intended to leave it up to us to make this decision. Perhaps such a leap of faith sounds rash to a committed materialist, but who can actually prove the existence of beauty or prove the existence of love? So Francis Collins, perhaps the peak of science, the CDC director, the leaders of our country were all deeply men of faith who were motivated to be humble servants to others. I'll talk about Ben Carson in a second because he was really truly our spiritual leader on that committee. So the first thing I want you to remember is that Jesuit education is going to be with you. And it's not really an education, it's more of an enlightenment. I called on discipline that I learned and got me through. I called on the leadership skills. And I always remember that my role in the world is to be a man for others, to try to be humble and help others. And you'll have your own lessons, but those were for me. The second message I want to give you is that God has a plan for you, and don't doubt that. God has a plan for you. There is no way in the world that I could have wound up from the West Bank of New Orleans with no one in my family, only one person actually going to high school, to be able to go through this journey, through the Jesuit education, to be given the opportunities I have if there weren't a hand in that. And, you're going to have lots of different times in your life where you're just going to have faith. You're going to have to say, this opportunity is there. It may not be what I planned, but it's probably what I need to do. And what I ask you all to do is be open to it. Be open to the opportunities. The world is not going to be 30 years straight in a line. It's going to have a lot of twists and turns. I never thought a pediatrician would go to DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. But the government, the military was worried about biological warfare. And they were worried about pandemics. So I got pulled in to do that. I never thought I would actually be in the assistant secretary, making national policies for vaccines, for HIV, for hepatitis, writing the nutrition guidelines for America. By the way, we meet the nutrition guidelines. That was very good. So always be open to that, because God has a plan for you, and you have to have faith in that. And wherever the destination, you have a good roadmap because you've got the Jesuit education. Wherever that destination is, you'll get it. And I want to give an example, my last example, of Ben Carson, Secretary Ben Carson. You guys know Ben Carson. He's African-American, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, who also ran for president. He was known, first of all, as the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. He was the top pediatric neurosurgeon in the world. He's also a very deeply religious man. And he told me the story, and it became, he's not shy about it, I just didn't know it, because we became very close. And he was sort of the spiritual leader of the task force, if there was a spiritual leader. So he grew up in Detroit. And I mean the wrong side of Detroit. If there's a wrong side of Detroit, he grew up in. He grew up in utter poverty, in a single-family home with lots of violence all over. And he was angry. He was an absolutely angry young man. So one day, when he was in 9th grade, he was 14 years old, he got in an argument with a friend of his about what radio station they were playing. Yeah, I had radios back then, so he was playing the wrong station. Ben Carson got angry. The Ben Carson we all know. He took a knife out of his pocket and plunged it into one of his best friends. God had a plan for him, though. That knife hit a belt buckle, and his friend was not stabbed. This was a moment for Ben that he got so frightened about his anger. He said he literally locked himself into a bathroom for 8 hours, and he kept repeating one line of scripture. And that's from Proverbs, who said, "One who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and one whose temper is controlled than one who captures a city." And from that moment on, he became the Ben Carson we know. In fact, you always look at him, he looks like he was asleep in the presidential debates, but that is because when he was 14-year-old, he made a deal, if you will, that he was going to always control his temper. And he was given that gift and a plan. And he decided later on that that knife was a metaphor, that he was no longer going to use it to hurt someone else, but he was going to use it to become a brain surgeon for children. That's a pretty remarkable story. So I want to say that God had a plan for Ben Carson, very clear. I think he has a plan for me. I don't know what the next journey is. And I can guarantee you he's got a plan for each of you. And you're going to be successful at whatever you do, because you have the Jesuit training, you have the Jesuit education, you have the Jesuit enlightenment. I know you won't be trapped by power and money. There's nothing wrong with having power. There's nothing wrong with having money. Just don't be trapped by them. If you don't have power, you can't do good things for other people. You can't make the changes in the world that we need to make. And if you have money, if you use it to support education, the underserved, your church, charities, that's all good things, but use them for others. So again, I didn't know what you expected to hear today, but I knew what I wanted to tell you. I knew what I wanted to tell you is that 44 years later, the Jesuit education, the Jesuit enlightenment I received is as vibrant and alive in me today as it is in you right now, about ready to graduate. And what you've developed here, I'm not going to say the rest of life is a piece of cake. It's not. There are going to be challenges. It's going to be hard. But your Jesuit education, your Jesuit enlightenment, and all the things you learned give you all the tools you need. You don't need any other tools. You've got the tools. They've been given to you. You've been blessed by them. You've learned to utilize them. Call them whenever you need them. Always be a person for others. Think about that. Be humble. This is a little bit out of the sequence, but everybody said I was so calm when doing television interviews. I tried to be humble. It was not about me. It's not about me being on TV. It's about trying to transmit some information to the rest of the country. And when I didn't know something, I just said I didn't know it. But I would try to find out for it, because we don't know things. People will appreciate you for that. So your Jesuit education will be alive and with you, and God has a plan. And with that, I just want to say thank you. It's truly an honor to be back here. It took me 3 years to get here. I wouldn't have missed this for anything. And God bless all of you. God bless priests and everyone who dedicates their life to you. I love the school, and I hope your love grows for it as much as mine has grown over the past 44 years. Thank you.